What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, following its gameplay debut at the Xbox Developer Direct just a few days ago. And while it's not a game I was initially planning on covering or really caring about, to be honest, the gameplay reveal was surprisingly good, so now I'm interested. And given that it's set to release later this year, though without a specific release date, we shouldn't have that much longer to wait. And in the meantime, I thought I'd cover a little bit about the game and share some opinions. This was originally announced in 2021, simply that it was in the works, with Todd Howard being an executive producer on the title and Machine Games developing it. And given that Machine Games' body of work is pretty much first-person shooters all about killing Nazis, this game being a first-person action adventure isn't a big leap. However, instead of just Nazis, this game will feature all of the Axis powers as antagonists. So first up, let's talk about some of the revealed story elements. This game is going to be taking place in 1937, which means before World War II. Of course, though, we play as Indiana Jones, going on an adventure to get to the bottom of a great mystery, in this case, the Great Circle. So if you're wondering what the Great Circle part of this is, it's meant to represent a series of historical sites from ancient civilizations that, when mapped out on the globe, make a perfect circle around the sphere. Which is a great concept for a video game because it is just intriguing enough, in my opinion. Though, while the Great Circle is technically a real thing, it's really just more of an internet theory. But like any good theory, it is technically partially true, as a great circle is any line that cuts a sphere in half, and because of that, you can do that pretty much from any point on Earth, and at some point, some things are going to line up, and the Great Circle, in this case that they're referring to, does actually line up a ton of historical sites, which gives that theory, and thus this game, the slightest veneer of realism to draw people in. So, a bizarre one, and for an Indiana Jones thing, I like it a lot. But nonetheless, the game kicks off with Indiana Jones being robbed by a figure stealing something of what he thought was little value that then leads him on a journey to the Vatican, where he starts to realize there's more to this than it might initially seem, which leads to the investigation of all of these sites, taking you across the globe, of course, to places like the Vatican, Sukhothai, or the Himalayas. Along the way, we're going to, of course, be meeting interesting characters, a partner in crime of sorts in the form of Gina, a reporter who also has a vested interest in this mystery, as it turns out, which I would say is almost necessary simply to keep this from being another action adventure with an ongoing internal monologue that never stops and answers all the puzzles for you, but also gives Indiana Jones here the space to bounce witty remarks off of, that kind of thing. But in addition to this character, we also know a little bit about the main villain as well, Emmerich Voss, said to be a highly intelligent and deeply manipulative man, who they described as someone they wanted to be sort of off-putting and creepy, who sort of bores into your soul at the same time, from the way I took it anyway. And what little bit they showed of him certainly seemed to give across that vibe. But I will say it's not the most original villain idea, though nothing wrong with the classic. Now from there, let's talk a little bit about gameplay. So while the game will be primarily first person, there are certain scenes and things where it will pop out into third person, such as when you're traversing certain world elements, or at other certain relevant moments, they said. And some of the examples they gave were climbing up a pole on the side of a building, or zip-lining down, it pops out to third person. So that's something to know. But otherwise, the game is going to be a mix of regular action adventure, which involves combat, but also elements of stealth and environmental puzzles. So they described the levels as being able to be approached from multiple angles. Will you take the stealth route, go around, or take a more direct approach, utilizing things like, of course, Indiana's whip, guns you pick up, or simply even your fists? So it looks like there will be a variety of approaches to these things rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. Now, probably the most interesting thing here, in my opinion, is the whip itself, as we don't see that in a lot of games, period, but in this one, it looks like you'll be able to use it in a variety of ways, some of which involve traversal, but also as an active weapon, of course, either disarming, knocking out, or attacking enemies in general. So it looks like it will likely be one of your most versatile tools. Now, one thing they showcased, though, was sneaking around and essentially doing reconnaissance on enemies, seeing what their routes are, patrol routes, things like that, and then deciding your angle of attack, which makes for, I think, some interesting stealth gameplay for what is supposed to be an action adventure, and I'm curious how much of that will actually factor into the experience in the long run. But another big thing they wanted to point out was, of course, puzzles, as this is an Indiana Jones game at the end of the day, so they talked about this a little bit. Along the main path, there will be a handful of required puzzles, but also a multitude of optional ones. In fact, while quite a few of them will be optional, there will also even be hidden puzzles, things that will lead you to extra rewards, of course, in both instances. But it does appear that solving no small amount of environmental puzzle, or just puzzles at large, will factor into this game as you might expect. Which, for me at least, leads me to, I would say, a couple of conclusions for this reveal overall. First of all, I think a lot of it looks quite good. It looks like a fun game to play, but I do have a couple reservations that I think will be impossible to assuage until I actually play the game for myself and see them. And those are primarily the level design and the puzzles themselves. Because puzzles, I've found in a game, are hard to get right, especially when there's a lot of them, because they're either way too easy or so obscure that they frankly get in the way of the rest of the game. So I think the quality of those, especially in how the game handles dealing with them, especially for the required ones, will certainly be a factor for people's enjoyment. But the other part of it is the level design itself, because while it's great that you can stealth your way around or take a more direct approach to these things, the quality of that experience and how fun that is to do is largely going to come down to how fun the areas you're given are to explore. So as you go spelunking through these ancient sites, what is there to see? What is there to engage with? Of course, on an enemy level, but also environmentally. Even platforming elements like traversing the terrain will factor into that. So how engaging those things are to engage with will, I think, ultimately be the decider of whether or not this is a fun game to play. Though, to wrap this video up, I think the overall story idea is fun. I think the initial gameplay showing here looks fun, with much of what I want to know simply coming down to what do these puzzles look like and how does it feel to actually move through some of these levels, because otherwise this looks like a pretty fun action adventure, and they certainly seem to get the tone of Indiana Jones right. But that is pretty much going to do it for this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it interesting, and by all means let me know what you think about it down below. I think the main thing I've seen people talk about is how they would have preferred third person entirely versus first person, but truthfully that's not something that's ever mattered to me personally, so not a big deal to me, of course. But otherwise, still very interested in hearing what people have to say about this, because I am certainly planning to review it. That though is it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.